Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Russell Panchenko, and as director of the museum, it's my pleasure to welcome you all this evening to our talk and to the opening of a fantastic exhibition. Welcome to this opening celebration for the exhibition, The Human Condition, the Stephen and Pamela Hootkin collection of contemporary ceramic sculpture. This exhibition comprises 119 works of art. It's one of the largest that we have ever organized, and it could not be contained in the Pleasant Tea Roland galleries where we normally present our major temporary exhibitions. In fact, this exhibition spreads through 3 floors in this building, as well as the Oscar Mayer Gallery and Page Court in the adjacent Conrad A. Elvium building. Now, to help you navigate your way through, we have developed an exhibition map. And when you go into the Roland galleries or the Garfield galleries on the 2nd floor, they're free. Please help yourself. Okay. All right. And the individual pieces, by the way, there's some individual pieces that are scattered through the permanent collection on the 3rd floor. But these are also marked with a special red title label, so you'll be able to spot them and find them. So this will show you where, and the red label will help you identify each piece. The Human Condition, the Stephen and Pamela Hootkin collection of contemporary ceramic sculpture, will be on view through Sunday, November 30th. This is truly an extraordinary collection, and we are very pleased to show it. And we are grateful to the lenders, Stephen and Pamela Hootkin, for assembling the collection, for parting with it for nearly 4 months. Their comment was, God, our loft is so big. You know, imagine living with everything that you see here in the galleries. And also, we're delighted to have them here tonight. Steve and Pam, could I get you to stand up and be recognized, please? Now, I usually don't do this, but I would like to get the Chazen staff members to stand up. I see you guys, you're hiding in the back row. They're not all here. Ann Sinfield, Steve, you know, yes. These are the folks. This is a very, very complex exhibition. I think those of you who are familiar with ceramics, you know just how difficult it is to move, crate, ship, and make sure it happens safely, getting it on display and lighting it. And I hate to tell you, our lighting specialist discovered about a week and a half ago, he said, oh, my foot hurts. I think I'll go to the doctor. And he came back and said, what was wrong with you? He said, well, they told me my foot's broken. And you can imagine panic on Steph. Is he going to be able to light this? Thank goodness he did. I'm sorry, I think he's out nursing his foot, but he'll be back for the reception. All right, following this evening's lecture, which will end at 6:30, I invite you to view this exhibition and partake of refreshments, which will be served in the Mead Witter Library. Our speakers, as well as our generous benefactors, Steve and Pamela, will be available then to answer questions. We will not have a Q&A at the end of the talk. A list of educational and family programs and films related to contemporary ceramic sculpture and to the theme, The Human Condition, will be available at the information desk in the lobby. The splendid exhibition catalog, which is being offered at a special 30% discount only this evening and through this opening weekend, as well as a beautiful poster, are available in the museum shop. This evening's talk, which is entitled Theater of the Figure, Ceramics in the Collection of Stephen and Pamela Hootkin, is being presented by Garth Clark and Mark Del Vecchio, 2 preeminent authorities on contemporary ceramics. We are indeed honored by their presence here in Madison. Garth Clark, born in Pretoria, South Africa, earned a Master of Arts degree from the Royal College of Art, London in 1976. He is a leading writer and commentator on modern and contemporary ceramic art. He has written, edited, and contributed to over 60 books on the subject and authored over 200 essays, reviews, and monographs. We are truly grateful to him for the outstanding essay that appears in the exhibition catalog itself. For his writing, Garth was recognized with the College Art Association's 2005 Mather Award for Distinguished Achievement in Art Journalism. Other book awards include the Art Book of the Year, award from the Art Library Society of America, In 2015, Thames and Hudson will publish his study of Lucio Fontana's ceramic work, and next fall they will also release his newest book on the renowned contemporary Chinese artist Ai Weiwei. It's entitled Mind Mud. I'm really looking forward to that one. Mark Del Vecchio, after managing a business which provided visual materials for educators, joined the Ceramic Arts Foundation in 1981. There he was managing director for Modernism and Ceramics, an international conference organized by the Ceramics Arts Foundation. In partnership with Garth Clark, he opened the Garth Clark Gallery in Los Angeles and then moved to New York in 1983 to direct their newest gallery on West 57th Street. As organizing director for the Ceramic Arts Foundation, Mark, together with Garth and others, produced a massive leadership conference in Amsterdam that attracted 3,500 people. It was called the Ceramic Millennium. Mark is also a recognized writer in his own right. His book entitled Postmodern Ceramics is widely used as a text in art schools. He is also an expert and consultant on auctions of modern ceramics and an active speaker internationally. Garth Clark and Mark Del Vecchio have been highly influential in the world of contemporary ceramics. They have both received Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Museum of Arts and Design in New York and the Friends of Contemporary Ceramics. When Garth Clark and Mark Del Vecchio closed their gallery in 2008, their extensive collection of over 600 ceramics works was acquired by the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. This collection was subsequently featured in an important exhibition and publication entitled Shifting Paradigms in Contemporary Ceramic Sculptures. This was published by Yale University Press. Today, they work together on a new venture, Garth Clark's nonprofit online ceramic news magazine called C-File. Please welcome Garth Clark and Mark Del Vecchio.
Thank you very much. You can hear me? Good. We're really thrilled to be here. Nice to see Peter again, and I see Janet up there somewhere. I want to welcome you all, including those who are viewing this in another room, and I believe YouTube as well. So, you know, if you thought you recognized us, it's probably because you come to the museum and you've seen our portrait.
I'm the sexy one on the right.
It's called A Sudden Rush of Blood to the Head. We decided only to show the uppermost extremities for reasons that you will understand when you see the sculpture, but it is anatomically very correct. So that sort of has given us a sort of special place with the Chazen Museum to begin with. But also relationships with other people in this town and around has made this a wonderful place to come to. Although I have to say, coming from Santa Fe, this place is awfully white. I've never seen so much sort of top white breeding stock in any other city together. Now you see, it's those kind of comments that worries Pam, because I told her that Russell said we should do this as a roast. And we've got the pictures to do it, but it won't be that. We'll be looking at things somewhat more academically, or at least aesthetically, if not academically. So, to get going, you may wonder how Mark and I are going to do this as a sort of two-part harmony. We'll give you...
and this is unrehearsed, I must tell you.
Yes, we'll give you an indication. So we start off with Pamela and Stephen.
Hootkin.
And their collection of ceramic
art. There.
So you see, it's not going to be complicated. It might be a bit tough for you, but for us it'll be very easy. The assembly works shown here are a snapshot of the ceramic movement from the mid-80s. Its ambitions, its boundary-breaking desires, and some specific aesthetic journeys within that movement that captured with hot passion, insight, intuition, and aesthetic rigor. How do we know this? They get worse, Pam. How do we know this? We were there. Knowing the Hootkins early in their collecting, when my partner Mark Del Vecchio and I were running the Garth Clark Gallery in New York and Los Angeles, and there you see us at dinner together with that absolutely extraordinary legend, our patron saint, the ceramist Beatrice Wirt.
We did not light the fuse, however. Don Thomas and his pioneering Convergence Gallery in Soho provided that spark. Though his gallery closed in the 1980s, Thomas and his fiery Cuban partner Jorge Cao remained close to the Hootkins. Knowing their sensibilities, Cao, with his vibrant postmodern flair, created the interiors to house, light, display, and celebrate their art in two homes. First, the apartment on the Upper East Side, and then their current loft in Tribeca.
Our rapport with the Hootkins was intense from day one. We began a conversation that has still not ended and has survived us giving up dealing in 2008 and our subsequent move to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Now, thematically, the collection can be divided into four main parts: the vessel, the painted figure, the earth figure, and the smallest part of the collection, none of the above.
The 14,000-year-old vessel tradition is the perfect starting point. However, the pots that the Hootkins acquired, collected are content bearers. There is not a single pot on show that is just pure form and glaze in the classic Asian model. Every piece is like the corked bottle from a castaway found afloat in the sea. It contains a message, often deeply complex, layered, literary, and footnoted in art history.
Anne Aggie's tulip vase is a statuesque, nearly 4-foot high piece, and is a powerful, busy exaggeration of this traditional Dutch form, and was made at the Cola Art Center that, amongst other things, runs a remarkable artist residency program with the Cola Art Center, with the Cola factory in nearby Sheboygan. I assume it's nearby. Like many vessels, the shape is not arbitrary, but it is directed by its utility. The reasons for spouts for each flower, for each stem, is that tulips have a life after being picked, as one can see in this early tulip vase, similar in construction, stacked, and with the tulips in place. Unlike flowers, other flowers, tulip stems do not remain static. They twist and move into their new organic configurations, and each stem devises its own choreography. So by having a separate spout to insert each stem, each one can move according to its own whim. You had to be with us once. We were traveling to a party with the ambassador from Holland, and Gretchen Atkins, our assistant director, when he explained this to her, told him he was talking nonsense. Now, to say that to the ambassador of Holland was really an exciting moment. She gave us lots of those. Aggie's part contains a day-long seminar of information. To begin with, tulip cultivation began in Persia, an important part of was an important part of the Ottoman trade. Persia was the source of the ceramic pigment of the 17th century, cobalt, that the Chinese then used to make blue and white porcelain, the most successful domestic product style in the history of mankind, and one that still holds that title. Imports of Chinese porcelains were at first costly. They arrived overland until the sea trade, begun with Asia, and for which the Dutch were largely responsible, began. Europe did not produce porcelain until 1710. So earlier, in 1640, the Dutch came up with an imitation, Delft. It was earthenware with white tin glaze and decorated with cobalt. And tulips were amongst their most successful and amongst their most sought-after forms. The reason for this is about 1670, 30 years later, tulip mania or tulipomania unleashed an overheated market in which futures on tulip bulbs were sold at extraordinarily high prices. One of the favorites was the Viceroy. You can see it in the middle of that 17th century painting. And it costs the same for a single bulb as the annual wage of a skilled craftsman. When this eventually collapsed, and there were many who warned that it was coming, you may laugh at the monkeys who were buying the tulip vases. Tulip bulbs, by the way. The vases did much better. They are worth a lot more today. When it collapsed, it caused the first known financial investment bubble. Bubbles even today are often referred to as tulip mania. Now, Agé's decoration is a contemporary expression of Dutch ceramists copying a Chinese original, and then it was sent to China, copied in export wares and sent back again. So it became a little incoherent in the process. The figure painted on this vase, and we will look at it in three parts, is in the vernacular of contemporary painting. The artist is representing a relative of hers who ate tulip bulbs to avoid starvation during the war, which contrasts a period of wealth and extravagance that both the tulip and Delft represented.
Then there is its presence as a form. Agé has created dramatic extensions of what a tulip vase is. It comes across as a demented octopus, albeit with more than 8 tentacles. There is movement. The spouts seem to wave in the air and create a furious linear energy, yet firmly anchored to the pot's volumetric center. It does not just sit there. It appears to be reaching for something. No, it is not just a vase.
Yeah, and that's sort of the point that we are making in this lecture, is that it's a large collection. For us to have gone through the whole collection would have meant, half a sentence for each piece. Rather, what we wanted to do was create a sense of the complexity. There is a problem with pots, and that is that most people look at a pot and think, oh, I know what that is. It's a pot. At that point, they've made a huge error. If they look at a painting, it's different. They've been schooled to realize that within the painting is content. They've not been schooled to realize the same thing in ceramics. So we've taken Agé's piece and only dealt with a few of the contextual things that exist with this. And almost every piece in this show has this richness of content. And we'll skip,
Yes.
and we'll come back.
See, this is when you know it's not rehearsed. I mean, things are out of order. It's sort of,
Oh, just a few things.
And we hate using scripts. We would rather just stand there and talk. That's what we did for 30 years in the gallery. But we want to be exact here.
We had to come in on time at 6:30.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, court porcelains, of which you can see here, hijacked Anne Krauss and lured her away from her painting studio. Their surface beauty, the mellifluous, translucent china painting, and the crisp, almost acid color fixated her. But their lack of emotional substance bothered her. No conflict, desire, and vulnerability. No intrigue. She decided to correct this. We gave her a solo exhibition shortly after she left Alfred University, and her beautiful introspective works gained immediate traction. All work sold during her first show was mostly to museums, other artists, which is a rare but good omen, and of course, the Hootkins.
Krauss made no attempt at virtuosity, certainly not in her craft, other than in her underglaze painting, which was remarkably fluid and relaxed. She did not seek super refinement. This is clear in Frontier Vase, where the Baroque ornament that erupts from the vase is almost a caricature of the real thing, brusquely formed, coarse, sans elegance, as the mold marks show, a real no-no in ceramics. And for Krauss, the pot was a stage for psychodrama. In a text neatly penned on her pots, themes were taken from her dream diaries.
Richard Notkin's teapots are not of the palace born. Chinese I Ching wares of 15th and 16th century were stoneware, and in the imperial palaces, only porcelain could touch the lips of the court. But I Ching wares were still made for an elite, the intelligentsia of Chinese poets, scholars, and philosophers who debated aesthetics with the potters, arguing over the elegance of a pot's volume or movement of line in a handle or spout, the first truly individual modern ceramic art.
I Ching is in China's Jiangsu province. It's an area blessed with a brocade of extraordinary natural clays, fine, velvety earth in a range of hues from pale beige through to red and into purple. And I Ching, by the way, in literal translation, is purple earth. In the late 15th century, potters began to make these remarkable teapots from this clay. They were mimicking nature, rocks, wooden branches, nuts, bamboo, and are some of the finest example of ceramic sculpting in Chinese art.
Change the image.
No, not yet.
Okay. This small-scale, issue-oriented art was Hootkins' métier, and the clay's velvet texture suited his skills as a modeler. He saw the potential to take these teapots, reinvent them in contemporary terms and language by subverting the conviviality of tea into tabletop monuments to man's inhumanity to man. Heart Teapot Hostage 3 from 1989. Who here was born in, anyway, is a heart and was inspired by the Buddha's hand fruit, the piece that you just saw before this, which was a traditional shape with I Ching teapots. He combined the kindness of tea with the symbol of the heart as a place of compassion. Have a heart, heartfelt, then subverts this to mean the polar opposite, heartlessness. Chains denote the taking and abuse of hostages and prisoners, and the color, almost black, is funereal. It is always surprising to come face to face with these objects, the refined sculpting and immaculate surfaces, and one has to address the shock of their blunt message. The pot's action takes place within a kind of proscenium arch that projects us from a full frontal assault of its content. It is like being an audience in a theater. The play may be engrossing, but the wall between the viewer and actor is not usually broken.
Whereupon we return to page 6. You see, for disorganized people, we are incredibly organized.
We have 2 photocopies of the same disorder. Michael Fremkes, oh yes, wonderful shot of Michael. Michael Fremkes loved Greek pots. Indeed, he enjoyed any pot that was a certified, identifiable cultural icon from the past, including Chinese ginger jars, Zuni oyas, and the Renaissance albarello jars. Fremkes was the boy wonder of the Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles, intent on becoming a painter, but wandered into the pot shop in the school's basement one day and encountered that giant of modern pottery, Peter Voulkos. Fremkes was one of the most talented of the so-called Otis Clay artists, a group that included Ken Price, John Mason, and Paul Soldner. In the 60s, he emerged, like Price, as a pop artist, as we see in The Marriage of Auntie Susanna, 1977, in which classicism beds postmodernism.
This form is based on the Vecchio pouring vessel and is one step in an uncompleted odyssey that the artist took on and that he terms melting pot. The idea was to make one pot from each major cultural society that had great and iconic works, and then after some years synthesize all of them into one ultimate pot that incorporated his worldview, in which mankind emerges as one cafe au lait color through colorblind lovemaking. It seemed like a really great dating scam to me. Sadly, he contracted multiple sclerosis and by the mid-70s lost his ability to throw, and the program was blunted. But he was recently on a very major exhibition at the Hammer Gallery in Los Angeles called Made in LA. a biennial and won one of the major prizes in that. So he is making a return in his late 80s, which is a wonderful thing to see. Okay, so now we get to sculpture. And unlike the pot, sculpture is different. It's less safe. The proscenium is gone and it invades our space. When one encounters a figure, it might leap out at you, particularly when the scale approaches or exceeds that of life. This is the dominant section of the Hootkin collection, and it is helpful for us to make a distinction and divide this work into two parts, those that are a collaboration between form and painting, and those that remain essentially monochrome in perhaps more classical sculptural tradition. One deals with the dance carnival and the other with the dance macabre. It is light versus dark.
The starting point for the former is Michael Lucero. He is the core sculptor in this part of the collection and introduces a very specific kind of theater, the circus. Imagining him as the ringmaster, resplendent in scarlet and white jacket with gold trim, wearing a large top hat and a twirled mustache, cracking the whip and conjuring humor and fascination as he introduces act after act. But with all ringmasters, there's just a touch of Machiavelli.
In the canon of ceramic sculpture, his shard figures have an important place. They are built up from hundreds of wired painted shards, surmounted with a representation of an actual head, and in other cases with pots serving that role, i.e. pot heads. In doing this, Lucero achieved three things. He invented a free-form method of assembling figures. He was able to make work much larger than the size of his kiln, and by using shards gave his ceramics a central conceptual purpose.
When he moved to New York in 1978, these works grew even larger. He did not initially have access to a kiln when he first arrived, so he made 17 shard figures out of light fruit crate stands scavenged in Chinatown. In 2012, intrigued by what had happened to these works, the Hootkins contacted the artist and discovered that Lucero still owned almost the entire group, so they were able to acquire the series. They were lent to the Chazen Museum of Art, and in 2013, an exhibition, Michael Lucero Installation, was organized. Viewers of the show were able to wander among giants made accessible, even friendly by the decorative palette and patterning of the painting. They are now a gift to the museum.
Okay, we will do a quick move.
Oh, another out-of-sequence moment.
Yes.
You'll cut all this out of YouTube, right?
There we go. Okay, Soul Catcher, New World Series 1994, is a metal tree of pots placed upside down that is more complex than the piece might seem. And in some ways, it's the master key. It's a way of unlocking the heart of Lucero's creative spirit. And even though it has something of a sideshow quality, one could imagine it being in a booth when one throws balls at pots to win oversized soft toys. But the work is actually rooted in spiritualism. While a soul catcher is a character type in Japanese manga comic book imagery, as I know Michael is aware, the roots of this piece are shamanistic.
In Native American culture, the soul catcher was sent to the spirit world to recapture one's soul lost during a dream in the spirit world. When the soul is trapped, captured, it does not return. This results in illness and maladies beyond the reach of herbal treatment. The soul catcher is sent to recover and return the soul.
And that's the reason why the pots are upside down, because if they stood the right way, the souls would immediately escape. Bear that in mind. Okay, so we hustle back a little, and there we are. Okay, so Lucero plays the ceramic card again, and this is something very interesting. A lot of people in the sculptural work, a lot of artists don't actually make sense of the reason why they are using clay. It is just a material of choice. In most of Lucero's works, there's a very specific reason for the medium. And in this case, with these pre-Columbus figures, arguably the most admired and popular of all of his series, his color turns these revered antiquities into harlequins, a polite way of saying clowns. Lucero also co-opts the mad potter of Biloxi, George E. Orr, America's first great ceramic artist from the first decade of the 20th century. Orr performed stunts, grew long moustaches that he would comb into bizarre shapes, and in many ways acted the fool while making the most profound ceramics of his generation. One of Orr's most famous works, and you can see the relationship between this and the piece by Lucero, is a pair of top hats. It was made in 1900, and they're entitled 9 o'clock in the evening, which is the one on the right, which is in pristine condition.
The one on the left. Left.
No. Anyway.
The one in pristine condition.
Yeah, you're right.
No, it's on the left.
Oh, you should see us in a car.
No.
And the other is 3 o'clock in the morning. It's ripped and torn after what was clearly a wild night on the town. Lucero's man with Orr hat, pre-Columbus, wears the latter hat. And the thing to remember is that Orr was the first ceramic artist to begin to work with conceptual ideas and create work which was not just a statement of beauty, but had other aesthetic intent. So we go to the Reclamation series now, which is where we really see that edge of his genius. Lucero rescued compromised pieces of garden sculpture, mainly made out of concrete, that had been damaged, and then he made them whole with a ceramic addition, much like the maker of glazed prosthetic devices. And again, there you see the relationship to the work of Orr. The teapot is a George Orr teapot, which I think you can see a little more clearly in that slide.
Conquistador, the title of this piece from 1995, is a Spanish soldier from an army that destroyed much of the pre-Columbian civilization and occupied Santa Fe, New Mexico, and links back to the pre-Columbian figures, an interesting dialogue that places victor and vanquished in this show in the same space. We leave.
Oh no, we've got a little sidetrack here.
Yes.
Pam had a lot of reason to be worried. There were lots of eyes in his work, and we did all kinds of things as friends in New York. We went to Broadway Bears, which is the best strip show in the entire world. It's actually a benefit for AIDS charities with all of the gypsies from the Broadway shows. We went out to late night dance clubs. We would meet at 2 a.m. and dance till 6. And we also did this Mark and I decided to create this extraordinary art event. It was a sort of performance event. It was inspired by the fact that Beatrice Wood, who was the first artist we took on and was a wonderful person in our life, had created this ball. It was a Dada ball that she did with Marcel Duchamp, who she also slept with, so we'll get that out of the way quickly.
In 1917.
And we were able to hire the same hall in which it happened. And we brought in Roy Lichtenstein, Jasper Johns, Bill T. Jones,
Jenny Holzer, Rhonda Pondick.
It was an extraordinary group.
And we're getting old, we forget now. Yes.
It was an amazing event, 1,500 people in Dada costume. It got rave reviews in the New York Times, and Vogue called it more than an event, more like a social revolution. So it was an extraordinary night. And Julie, who is here somewhere,
Julie Hootkin.
yes, up there, knows because at the age of 14 she was snuck in by her parents, briefly, just briefly. And so what happened was that Michael decided to create the costume for Pamela Hootkin. And
At least we think that's Pam.
okay, so that was definitely a yes. So Mark.
Yes, we leave Lucero's three-ring circus and enter the freak show with Doggy Bob, 1982. The head is that of a man, the major figure in 20th century American ceramic sculpture, the poet of scatology, Robert Arneson.
In the late 1950s and 1960s, Arneson changed the contextual relationship between ceramics and contemporary sculpture. He took the ceramic figure out of the display cabinet and into the art arena, making work that was deliberately confrontational, and like the dog, it was not well house-trained. There's another version of this, by the way, and that is he made, I think, what, 8? 8 in the series, and the feces are very brightly colored. And the reason was that he really disliked Ken Price. So the feces represented Ken Price's multicolored architectural cups, which basically was a message that said, my X is better than your art. So we move on. Now, scatology is key to Arneson's aesthetic. His John series, represented by the Hieronyl and other major works, is considered to be Arneson's first incendiary ceramic device. He lobbed it into a public exhibition, an invitational survey work of Californian sculptors, on the rooftop gallery of Kaiser Industries in 1963. The work was thrown out, and with that, the funk movement began.
Viola Fry, also from the West Coast, Oakland Bay area, approached glaze painting and bright low-fire palette was similar to that of her friend Arneson. Fry's forms were more abstract. Facial details, for instance, were rudely formed. The detailing coming from painting and with little interest in realism. She used color in a more expressionistic mode and often very thickly on the surface, creating texture. Grandmother Figure from 1978-80 is without argument the most exhibited work by this artist. From this 6-foot piece onwards, the figures grew larger and larger until they began topping 8 to 10 feet. As this trend began, I asked her what was driving the growth spurt. I grew up on a winery, and the vines were always taller than me. I could never see beyond that. I suppose my figures are made to look beyond the vines. If one looks at both Man and His World and the famous grandmother figure, one senses an influence from modernism in the first half of the 20th century, and if one guesses German Expressionism, you are right. Specifically, Max Beckmann, one of the best of that movement, was Fry's painting muse.
So far, every work you've seen has been touched, and rather obviously so, by the flame. The surfaces are fictile, but this is not true of the next two artists, Judy Fox and Beth Kavanagh, previously Beth Kavanagh Stichter. Here the relationship between ceramics and painting is actual. The surface is covered not with glaze, but with acrylic, cassine, and oil paint. What this does is neutralize the ceramic presence. The ceramic work is literally undercover. Both artists make the medium private. Each chooses to work with clay in creating the form because of the medium's superb modeling qualities, but then the surface is covered in non-ceramic paint. Fox's babies and her pubescent girls live on a cusp between painting and reality. In their charged innocence, they recall the paintings of Balthus. Each is frozen in a shutter click of mid-motion, most dramatically in the son of Saturn, a baby falling from a ledge. Son of Saturn, by the way, is a superhero. He has the power of flight, so you don't have to worry about the fate befalling the baby.
Rapunzel from 1998 is one of Fox's finest works. Taken from a German fairy tale, she grows up as the most beautiful girl in the world, removed from the world and trapped in a tower, falls in love with a prince who reaches her by climbing the golden stair, her long braided hair. Fox creates two conical tiers of hair as sculptural counterpoints of the figure.
Fox's use of realism in the painting is delicately balanced. It is not the superrealism of Ron Muke. Fox's works are almost real. Her people inhabit a place where they are for a moment dislocated from reality for the viewer. But in an instant, as light plays on the surface, they can shift back to life and then away from life again. This is their perpetual tease.
Beth Kavaner's lens is zoomorphic. She translates human behavior into that of the animals they most closely resemble. It's a habit that began young. Her father was an academic gypsy, moving almost every other year to a new university where, as a child, she would have to encounter a room full of strangers where she shifted from school to school. Her coping device was to give her fellow students animal identities, which calmed her anxiety and also allowed her to, if not understand, at least accept some of the cruelty to which she was subjected to as a newcomer.
The Hootkins have numerous works of hers, but we will look at just one, L'Amante from 2012. The meaning of the word is a rush of the meaning of the word is about affection and attraction. It is a rush of words that involves fondness, keen, loving, be fond of, love, like, be attracted to, enjoy, and prefer. The pose is enticing and the leg is stretched outward, an invitation for seduction, perhaps, as often occurs in her work. The surface is painted by a collaborator and now a husband, actually her husband, I should say, Alessandro Gallo, and it's done in Griselle, a style of monochromatic painting in shades of grey, often used to represent relief on sculpture. The subject matter, however, is tattoos of a highly specific type. They are linked to the Yakuza, members of the Japanese mob.
Kavaner likes hares because they are so powerful and swift, and because there is hardly a more anxiety-ridden organism on the planet. In captivity, they can live for 10 years. In nature, most do not make it to the first year, and it's rare for a hare to live for 2 years. Kavaner notes, everything about the wild hare, mind and body, is a development and reaction to an ever-present fear. Rabbits are born with their eyes closed. Hares are born with their eyes wide open and fearful, with fur and ready to run, literally, from womb to tomb. They can travel at speeds at up to 50 miles an hour, leaping 20 feet in one stride. The hare is Beth.
And Lamante's musculature betrays inattention. I'm surprised we didn't get a laugh out of the slide on the screen, but it is a bit grim. It is as though at any second the offer of love may be withdrawn in fear and distrust. Now that the painted figure is behind us, we've arrived at the feet of Earth Mother. Here figures are literally born of clay. Time and place is unknown, except that it seems distant and prehistoric. The mood is serious, and if there is humor, it comes via paradox or pathos. Also, this work has an unapologetic closeness to death.
Fertility is very much the Earth Mother's role, and although this sculpture, Growing Towers from 1983 by Charles Simmons, is not obviously human, it does possess a powerful sense of fecundity. Simmons created a race of mythical little people that lived in tiny communities, built painstakingly from tiny little bricks, installed in crumbling corners of downtown Manhattan, but mimicking the adobe pueblo communities of New Mexico where Simmons had spent some time. It is many things at once. The Stonehenge of the desert, thrusting, urgent ceremonial brick towers, or a transgressive desert plant morphing from man-made structure to organic flowering peaks. It is as though at some point man abruptly departed and nature took upon herself to complete the project.
The best known of these works, is in the stairwell of the Whitney Museum, and one hopes that the Metropolitan Museum will leave this in situ when they take over the building in a year's time. It is titled Dwellings, 1981, and it is actually a triptych. The other two pieces can barely be seen, but they are in buildings across the street. Now, Steve first saw this piece in the book, The Eloquent Object. He sought it out. He discovered that it was owned by Leo Castelli. He had Castelli bring it in from a storage where it had been for some time, and the deal was made. Then we moved to Daisy Youngblood, whose bond with clay is delicate and marked by an economy of detail. In Romana, 1987.
Feel free.
Oh.
Told him he should do it on his own. In Romana, 1987, mythic potency is pronounced. Form-wise, it is exquisite. Look at this figure from the side in silhouette. The curve of the back is exaggerated, tensely arched as though to hold up a heavy head. The elephant trunk drops in a perfectly straight line, stopping provocatively just above Romana's groin. The bulge of her belly pushes it away so its tip does not touch, but hovers. And lastly, the negative space between trunk and torso creates a well of intimacy in which the trunk's heavy girth contrasts with the tiny breasts and sharp, small nipples, fiercely present in relief. It is a masterpiece.
The last work is one that belongs to the section None of the Above. While there is a lot of abstraction in this collection, there is only one work that is not figurative, Ken Price's The Void That's There or Perhaps Isn't There from 1988. It is not pure abstraction, which means non-objective, in that it is not drawn from any known object. It has a pure shape and form, but it has a meaning and a background. It is fundamentally a reductive vessel. The blobs that follow this did not meet this criteria and were indeed purely abstract. But The Void is the very last work in a journey by Ken Price that began when he was a functional potter for nearly 8 years in the 1950s, and then in 1960 had his first solo show with the Ferris Gallery, run by the legendary Irving Blum, who now lives in Santa Fe and happily has been a friend of ours for 30 years. And while admitting that the vessel was still important to him, he announced that he no longer made pots. He wanted to make art about pottery. And there's a picture of the Ferris Gallery. You notice that above the sign Ferris, there's a little sign that says to rent. That office was rented a few weeks later by Art Forum magazine. That's just a little piece of art trivia for you. And there you have a young Ken Price, very, very handsome matinee idol looking surfer dude from Venice. Also there is the first exhibition, his first solo show in 1960. He had just left Alfred and decided he wanted to have nothing to do with ceramics, which going to Alfred sometimes does to you. And from there on had 3 very, very successful shows.
Price was part of one of the most important 20th century art movements in America, the fetish finish. It gave us not just Price, a gifted colorist, but a wave of new California artists. Ed Kienholz, Ed Roche, John Mason, Robert Irwin, Billy L. Bengston, Larry Bell, Ed Moses, many destined for international careers. As importantly, Ferris represented Andy Warhol in his first gallery show with the Campbell's Soup Cans. And the stable included Ellsworth Kelly, Jasper Johns, Roy Lichtenstein, and Frank Stella. So Price was familiar with their work and friends of the New York scene as well. Price did not co-opt art for his ceramics. He lived it.
The void has all the components of a vessel. It's a large volumetric shape. The volume inside is fictional rather than functional because it is nearly solid. And there is a mouth for one to enter the space, but it's not a pot. It's a sculpture in the same way that a sculpture of a chair is not a chair. The surface is paint. Price was one of the most original colorists of his day. He moved between glaze and paint, or combined the two on one piece. In the void, he has layered colors on the surface and then skillfully rubbed through the layers to expose a scattered rainbow below.
When his retrospective show arrived at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 2013 via the Los Angeles County Museum of Art and the National Museum in Dallas, Garth, the Hootkins, and myself were at the preview on June 17th. The next day, the expansive full front page rave review in the New York Times, dwarfing that of Turrell's much anticipated installation at the Guggenheim, welcomed Ken Price, who alas died 2 years earlier, to the highest tier of American contemporary art.
The next night, the four of us had dinner together, drinks at the Loft, introductions to new arrivals in the collection. We had not seen each other for a while. And then off to a Tribeca eatery. There was a quiet understanding that night that we had shared something with the Price's show. A long journey with an arrival at an important destination. Not the end of the line, there's still a way to go for all four of us, I would think, but something irrevocably positive had changed in the stature of this material culture that we lived so deeply and loved so deeply. Before leaving their loft for dinner, I remember looking at the art, always beautifully lit and installed, a respect the Hootkins always showed to their artists, no matter the cost or the effort. And I felt an affirmation of this couple's informed pursuit, their fascination, loyalty, intuition, belief, taste, energy, scholarship, investment of time and resources. Somehow that was a week in which the Hootkins collection received its coronation, as did Price's talent. And I imagined I saw some of the clay figures smile. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.